Yeah. All right, Lagos, Nigeria world, here we are. It is freshly pressed for a hump of the week Wednesday on Smooth Breakfast. I'm Sope Martins in the
And I'm Victor
studio.
Pepple.
Oh, there you are in the studio with Devoe and Pepple is being Pepple. And of course, we have got Lakunle joining us as well because this is a Wednesday. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you? Hi, Devoe.
Good morning.
Hello. Hello. Hi.
There we
Okay.
go.
Morning, Lagos. Morning, team. Cool. Let's start the race.
Aha. And good morning, Lakunle.
Good morning, Shokwe. Good morning, people. Good morning, Devoe.
So,
Echo. Let the race begin.
yes, I was about to say, on your mark, get set.
Go.
Okay. All right. So we've got YouTube. We are already streaming live up on youtube.com/smooth981 FM Lagos. Please come up on YouTube, see what's going on behind the scenes, and leave your comments as well in the comment section. You can also send messages via WhatsApp 20809 440 and you can take it to Twitter. Tweet at us at smooth981 FM. We're going to start off the stories with this one in from the Punch newspaper, and we're talking about the results of the Monetary Policy Committee. Um, the headline reads, inflation, CBN raises interest rate to 15.5%. So the benchmark interest rate went up 150 basis points from 14% to 15.5% in order to tame the rising inflation rate, which exceeded 20%, the 20% mark in August, with food inflation even higher, Devoe. And so there were expectations that the CBN would further raise the rate. However, this is the third time it's raised the rates in 5 months. However, are we going to see anything tangible any tangible results coming as a result of this?
Thank you very much. I think that's the first time I've ever thanked you for handing the position over. But this story actually, I mean, it breaks my heart because the response that I would have expected from the media, I'm not seeing. And there is a rabbit inside their hats that people are not aware about. And why I'm saying this is, yes, CBN had their monetary policy meeting yesterday. If you watched it, it was essentially about how they're going to attempt to address the inflation, right? And inflation is the high rise in prices of goods and services without commensurate rise in your pocket. So it becomes more expensive to do literally anything. Now, the highlight of the meeting was the benchmark interest rate, which is at 15.5%. They've raised it. I mean, just marginal, like 1% above what it was before. They've been doing that for some time to see how they can check it, because this inflation has been aggressive for almost in excess of 6 months. Now, and with prime lending rates at that used to be at around 23, 25%, you will now start hearing banks talk to you about lending from 30% and above. Yeah, we're back to those days.
Fun times.
Now, cash reserve ratio was at 32. It was raised to 32.5% from 27.5. Cash reserve ratio is just the amount that CBN keeps back from the banks. It's like a risk management act to ensure that there's some kind of level of hedge against any fallout in the long run. And sometimes they use it to control liquidity in the market. However, people need to understand the source of this inflation, okay? Yes, the first source is the one that the government usually tells you about, which is the macroeconomic factors. That's the global factors when they tell you that, oh, Nigeria is not the only one being affected, that this is happening to everybody around the world. Everybody's paying higher gas prices. Well, yes,
Which they are.
Yes, the Russia-Ukraine war, the fallouts literally tossed the global supply chain into tatters. So many people around the world are not getting things as they should, from good to even food and services. Energy supplies were especially hit, which is why in our deregulated markets, you see the hike in the prices of diesel, you see the hike in the prices of kerosene and gas as well, even though we're top gas supplier. Also, crude oil theft. This is the aspect that you don't hear. Now, because of the gargantuous volumes of the crude oil theft, almost to the tune of 50% of Nigeria's production, it has tanked our income. So we're not making as much as we should have. Our revenue is almost at cut half. And where it especially hurts us is because crude oil is where Nigeria makes 95% of its foreign exchange earnings. Okay? So that's why, to a large extent, because we're not making as much, we don't have as much to now distribute to the market. There's this pursuit, huge pursuit for dollar, which is driving prices up. Because remember, we're a high import nation. Most of the stuff that we use and even eat is imported. So that hits us at the end of the day because not enough dollars to go around. Three, another aspect that the government doesn't like to talk about, but it's one of the causes of inflation, is the insecurity. We know that we've been battered for insecurity literally throughout the course of this administration. And because of that, that's hit the farmers very badly. So there's weak or no production in many of the different food products that we have. And at the end of the day, we have to import to make up the difference, which simply means people are still having to pay much higher prices.
Extra.
Yeah, so this you need to understand that this is where the inflation is coming from. Now, this is
is this something the Monetary Policy Committee can
Thank
deal
you
with?
very much. You seem to be in the spirit today, Chopin. Now, the challenge here is that the CBN, I can't really blame them. You know why? Because they're monetary policy regulators. They really don't have the capacity to intervene with their own tools, okay? Now, the real burden is actually on the fiscal strategy, which lies in the hands of the Ministry of Finance and the National Economic Council and the National Economic Advisor. We've not really heard much from them in a long while. And in an ideal society, not even an ideal society, it used to be like that in Nigeria, where you would have a lot of competence and leadership at the Ministry of Finance and at the seat of the National Economic Advisor. One would say maybe they've given recommendations, but is the presidency following? Well, you can see now that we're really suffering because
we've had recommendations even from international bodies.
Yes. So the question is here, what's the plan? How are they going to grow the economy? Because the long-term panacea, the long-term remedy is not to continue moving figures and policies and graphs up and down. No, the real policy for anybody who is suffering from inadequacy is, how are you going to produce? What is the policy? What are the hard decisions you can take? Because sometimes it's not so much about a miracle. You can make some certain moves with what you have to be able to give you some level of relief. Like, for example, are you going to cut the subsidies? Starting with the petroleum subsidies, the FX subsidies, the electricity tariff subsidies, which will bring some relief, cut some of the leakage and the drain. Are you going to crucify corruption? Are you going to, because it's not that you put take a subsidy out in one way and then leave some criminals to take it out
because
in another way.
Devoe, even with the cutting of the subsidies now, or the removal of subsidies, sorry, let me put it that way. We've seen what is going on in Tunisia. We've seen what has happened in Haiti. We've seen, we're seeing real protests and unrest in all of the country, not all of the countries, but a number of the countries that have implemented this.
Finally, the one I wanted to add was, are you going to liberalize social infrastructure? That's a key one. We're already speaking about the ASU strike day in, day out. Government can't fund it. So how are you going to keep it going? Healthcare from time immemorial, we've almost been shouting how our healthcare institutions are not working properly, transports, etc. These are the actions that need to be taken to actually build an economy that can grow itself out of the grapples of inflation and lack of monetary supply. And I hope somebody somewhere is willing to listen and put pressure on this government before they leave, that they need to do the right thing.
Well, we've got to move on to our next story. We'd love to spend some more time on this, but hey, you get what you get with Freshly Pressed, and which is a number of stories within a limited amount of time. Pepple, over to you.
The Guardian newspaper now, you have no permits to procure weapons, Buhari warns governors. Now, against the backdrop ground of demand by the Ondo State Governor, Rotimi Akeredolu, to arm Amotekun operatives with AK-47 rifles. The presidency yesterday warned governors against the decision to authorize the procurement of automatic weapons for security outfits. In fact, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Gary Bashehu, categorically declared that nobody has such latitude except with the express permission of the National Security Advisor. And Lakunle, we're coming to you for this one.
Devoe, we're coming to you for this one, actually.
Yes, that's not Lakunle's story.
All right, Devoe, go ahead.
Okay. Basically here, the presidency is coming out to clarify a position that, would I say, for some time now, many have reported Akeredolu, that's the governor of Ondo State's position on arming of his local vigilante called Amotekun. We remember the brouhaha that came, I think, about a year or two ago when the Southwest decided to unite and create this subnational security force. And the presidency at that time asked them to follow the right form of legislation to be able to operate. However, one of the biggest downsides was that they were not given the rights to carry arms. And the question was, how successful would they have been coming against those days we used to refer to them as killer herdsmen because of all the armory, and then the bandits or terrorists who have been moving around with heavy artillery. Well, Akeredolu had a position that he noticed that in Castina, they seem to have been arming their own security forces, which the presidency clarified that what happened in Castina was that the governor sent some of the security personnel to the Defense Training College. Of course, the Defense Training College has that license and used it to train them. However, they categorically stated that they were not going to take over the role of the security forces. So the governor should be very mindful that no one can arm themselves unless they've been given express approval by the National Security Advisor, which has not come yet. Any attempt to do that, or anybody who is carrying weapons without approval, should be prosecuted. Well, the truth is this. I think beyond this higgy haga or this brickbat over Amotekun, I think the subnationals and the federal government need to sit down squarely on a proper security architectural solution. And I'm talking about state police here. We can't keep going around in circles like chickens, or chasing a headless chicken, or putting ourselves in our heads in the ground as ostriches. We need to address the problem. Amotekun is literally what I call it, an auxiliary form of security. It is not real security. Why are we handling security with kids' gloves? Why are we handling security like children? Why don't we address it and make sure that we secure our land? You can see how it's affecting the country's economy. You can see how it's affecting our welfare and livelihood. You can see how it's affecting everything to life. What's all this childish play about security for?
Keep sending your messages in via WhatsApp to 0809 444 981. The next story that we've got now from the Punch newspaper, APC and PDP exceeded campaign spending limit. This coming in from INEC. So they apparently are among the parties that are yet to submit their audit reports from the last general election. So the two major parties also ran afoul of campaign expenditures, as they were said to have exceeded the 1 billion naira ceiling set by the Electoral Act. Lakunle, I'll come to you for this.
Okay, so let's start by saying the law is the law. The government, the spirit behind the law is to monitor how much money everybody spends. This story is about the last election that was held 4 years ago. It's taking us almost 4 years. Another election cycle has started before we got a report of how much was expended. But in the view of things today, the cost of everything that we just talked about, the cost of funds, the inflation that has hit everything, our house rent, how much you pay, the cost of renting cabs, the cost of advertisements that has changed over the period, you would agree with me that 1 billion naira is not even it's not enough to scratch the surface of the amount needed for a campaign to hold. So in that regard, in my opinion, I think that we should even more focus on the source of the funding much more than how much money is spent. If we look at it from that perspective, I just did a little bit of a quick look at the cost of some things. Those electronic boards you see outside, it costs a minimum of 450,000, right, per month anywhere in Nigeria. It could be as high as 4.5 million in Lagos. So how many of those boards are going to be maintained by a political party? How many 4.5 millions are inside 1 billion? So even advertising alone would take all of the 1 billion within a blink of an eye. We have not talked about rent for campaign offices. We have not talked about cost of fueling of the vehicles that will be acquired and so on and so forth. So in that regard, I'd think that the source of the funding should be the main focus. Okay, so if you are going to spend 10 billion, you must be able to declare the source of that 10 billion. And we must be seeing that it is within the legal sources of funding, contribution by members, donation by members, out of pocket of the candidates themselves, monies such as monies from money laundering, drugs, proceeds from crime, from foreign donors. It is that all those ones that are counted as illegal should be things that should be, we should ensure that are not part of the funding for this. So 1 billion naira for this election per party, I think is too small. I think that we should focus on the source of the funding rather than on the amount itself, so that even people will be honest in coming forward with this is how much I spent. Now, you look at that report, also said something about training auditors. Auditors will only see what they've been given. Our politicians are very clever about hiding a lot of these things. So it's possible they even hide some of these funds themselves. So let us focus more on the source of the funding rather than the amount that is being spent.
All right, let's look at this one from the Punch newspaper. Court nullifies Ogun primaries. Factional candidates divided. In fact, the High Court sitting in Abeokuta, Ogun State on Tuesday nullified all primaries conducted by the various factions of the PDP in the state. Lakunle, would you want to share your thoughts on this story? Because, I mean, the presiding judge had called for a rerun within 14 days.
You know that the INEC 2 weeks ago gave us a list. They gave us a list of people who have qualified to run and candidate. And the law says the only condition that anybody on that list can be replaced is either by death or the act or pronouncement of a court. So this pronouncement of the court has opened the ground for the election for election rerun in Ogun State. So having said that, it now comes back to PDP in Ogun State. It seems like the crisis in PDP is not just at the national level. It's creeping up its head in bits and pieces all over the place. In Ogun State particularly are not thereabout. And this is who've joined, who are staking a claim onto who should run. You have members who've been there from day one, who says that they own the party, and
Luckily, we're having a slight.
Don't forget also the primaries that are held in Ogun State. There are 2 or 3 different declared themselves as governorship candidates. It was Ladi Adebutu's name that came up as the candidate on the premise that that was the election that INEC monitored. So this court case is giving them a cleaner ground for them to be able to challenge in Ogun State.
Well, whilst we wait for the connection to just stabilize, we'll read out some of your messages. This one comes in from Shagun up on WhatsApp. The number one policy in Nigeria is to remove subsidies, but will the populace and NLC accept it when the prices rise? Campaigning about it will be easy, but I do not envy the next president. Gilbert Musa from Festac says, like your analyst Devoe said, this is not the time to start moving figures. And he puts in brackets CBN. More importantly, the need for strong institutions and disciplined people to work with them is necessary. Idima Puza from Surulere says political parties campaign takes off today. The season of empty promises takes off today. Nigerians should shine their eyes and ears. Politicians, we need to ask politicians salient questions on their promises because we're the ones who will suffer for our wrong choices. The next one will come in Tyre from Aja, who says political parties failed to file returns to INEC for over 4 years. People, we are living in an Orwellian farm. Okay. D from Alausa says, our blood pressure seems to rise when we listen to Devoe. Okay, well, because of the topics. Well, D, make your point. And more messages coming in, but we'll take them after our next story. So this next one will come in from the Punch newspaper. APC postpones commencement of campaign indefinitely. So going into this story now, the Presidential Campaign Council of the All Progressives Congress has postponed the commencement of its campaigns, which was earlier scheduled for today. Devoe, coming over to you.
Yes, as we all know, today marks the beginning of the campaign season for the 2023 general elections in Nigeria. Can I hear a hip hop hooray out there? Yes, we've been waiting. We've been holding ourselves down. This is now when you can all come out and let your voices be heard and actions be made on who you'll be looking at governing you come 2023. Remember, it's not all about the presidency. There's also the gubernatorial. There's also the National Assembly, which is the most important at both federal and state levels. Now, what has happened is that out of all the parties that INEC has released the list, the APC actually had planned to kick off their campaign today with the announcement of their campaign council and how they will be going about it. However, the DG, that's the governor of Plateau State, Saman Lalong, came out with a statement that they have postponed. And this was due to the fact that they would want to accommodate more stakeholders. Now, the truth is this, it sounds like a simple statement, but what is really happening within the APC is that they're having internal family squabbles. And literally there are disputes over some people threatening to leave because they feel they've been left out. So it's issues over inclusion and diversity. And this diversity and inclusion are squabbles over, first of all, you know, the one that's been hitting the APC is the issue over the Muslim tickets. So there's still a lot of Northern Christians and other aggrieved personalities within the APC who believe that they have their concerns have not been addressed. There's also the issue of zoning in terms of tribal balance. You pick that person, you haven't picked me. There's also the issue of party faithfuls. APC has had this issue for quite some time now. People who across the two administrations or the two tenures of the APC have not seen themselves being given any role or being given any reward for all their participation and contribution, and literally the general public. But it's campaign season. So what it means is this is a time to engage not just the party you intend to vote for, work with them. I encourage every Nigerian to work with a party, understand how this process works, understands that you are part and parcel of this nation, and that at the end of the day, these parties need to actually feel your pulse. So I'm looking forward. Remember, it's not just APC and the PDP. You also have the Labour Party, the NMPP, the ADC, the Action Congress. There's almost like a list of 18 major parties that are contending for these ballots. Please get yourself involved one way or the other.
All right, let's look through some of the messages that have come in real quickly. Victor Shehu is saying, in as much as the CBN cannot squarely address the valid points driving inflation by Devoe, the hike in rates is theoretically meant to induce recession, so economic growth will slow and drop. Demand for energy prices will moderate and global economy will reset. Recession itself isn't bad. It is a lower growth in GDP relative to the preceding quarter. And Samuel from Lekki says the president is aware that herdsmen brandish automatic rifles without anybody stopping them. The police has always asked people to hand over their weapons, but these same people who have been constantly accused of attacking communities still keep theirs. Who gave them the permit? Is the president directly telling us we have no rights to self-defense? And I'll just squeeze one in from Dami Inikorodu, who says, one would be tempted to feel sorry for the CBN and its governor had they not been willing participants in building up these inflationary pressures.
All right, let's move on to our next story.
All right, from the Vanguard newspaper, electoral offences bill to be ready for 2023 general election. Now, the Senate has assured that the electoral offences bill will be ready before the polls. Lakunle, let's come to you for this one.
Okay, so great news for me, because why did I say that? There was an election in I think the last election in Osun. We had that we deployed 21,000 policemen. Why did we need 21,000 people to keep peace and order in an election in just one state? We know that the police is already stretched. If you add the numbers of the NCDC tweets, we may not have enough to cover the whole country. So I'm glad that this law is going to come into force. And when it comes, it will clearly spell out what awaits every individual. It also spells out what the parties stand to gain or lose by involving themselves in any form of electoral malpractice or criminal acts. But the most important of all of it is that we need to get this law out quickly. Let us circulate the content to people so that all of us will understand the consequences of our actions. And as a personal advice, I would like to plead with people who are listening to us this morning. Let us be part of those people who will set Nigeria right. Let us be of good behavior. Don't allow ourselves to be used, ourselves, our children, husband, wives, as it may be, to be used for any electoral offenses or malpractice or crime, because the consequences that will come with it should be something that everybody should be afraid of. I hopefully that the Senate will expedite action on it, and Mr. President can accede to it before February next year, so that it can come into force. We need something to at least limit the extent to which people can go as far as elections are concerned in this country.
All right, just going over to your messages now. Let's, as we come to the end of the show, take this one from the YouTube platform. Remember, well, we've come to the end of the show, so maybe not leave any more comments. But Oluwamayowa Sani says, I don't think it's a good time to remove the subsidies because that's only going to worsen the inflation issue. Anthony A. Francis says, this is the real reason that Keredolu and Wike are insisting on a Southern president. The issue of security will remain shady, he says. And that is that for Freshly Pressed. Thank you so much for sending your messages in via WhatsApp, via YouTube as well. And you can keep the conversation going up on Twitter. Lakunle is there at Lakunle70. Of course, we are at Smooth981 FM. It's been a real pleasure having you on, Devoe. And you as well, Lakunle. Thank you so much for joining us this Wednesday morning. Coming up, it is going to be Sports Talk inside the locker room. So keep it tuned for that.